The sun was low in the sky above the human colony. The planet was strange, with tall red grass that moved in the wind like waves and skies filled with two moons. The colony had been here for only 5 years, but the people already called this place home. They had built farms, houses, and markets, and children ran freely between the domes and fields. Milan, a young farmer, was working in the field that day. His hands were rough from lifting soil and carrying water, but he did not complain. He loved the land even if it was not earth. He loved the smell of the grass and the sight of the wide sky. Life here was hard, yet it felt real and honest. Suddenly, a loud sound came from the sky. It was like thunder but sharper, almost metallic. Everyone in the colony looked up at once. A giant shadow covered the fields as a massive alien ship descended. The ship was black and silver, shaped like a blade with glowing blue engines. It moved with power and silence that made the ground tremble. The colony alarm rang out. Men and women rushed from their homes. Children were pulled inside. Soldiers from the defense tower readied their rifles, though everyone knew they were small against such a ship. Milan dropped his tools and stood still, staring with wide eyes. He had never seen a ship like this, not even in the old records of Earth fleets. The ship landed just outside the colony wall. Dust rose high as the engines cooled. The doors opened, and figures walked out. At first, they looked like shadows, but as they stepped closer, the colonists could see them clearly. They were tall, taller than any human, with bodies covered in dark fur. Their eyes glowed yellow, and their jaws were sharp like wolves. Yet they walked on two legs and carried themselves with pride. Fear spread among the colonists. Mothers hugged children. Soldiers raised rifles, but their hands shook. The aliens moved forward in rows, their steps heavy and steady. At the front walked the largest of them all. His fur was silver mixed with black. His shoulders were broad, and his eyes burned with fierce light. He wore armor of dark metal with markings that seemed ancient. He was the Alpha. The Alpha stopped in the open field before the colony gates. His voice was deep and rough, but the translator device on his chest turned it into human words. "We are the Varrock," he said. "We seek strength. We test every world we touch. Who among you stands as your strongest?" No one answered. The colonists looked at each other, fear filling their faces. The soldiers did not move. The leaders of the colony, men in clean uniforms, stayed silent. The Alpha's gaze swept across the crowd. His yellow eyes stopped on Milan. The young farmer felt his heart freeze. Why him? He was not a soldier, not a leader. He was only a farmer who worked the land. Yet the Alpha raised his clawed hand and pointed straight at him. "You," the Alpha growled. "You stand for your people." Gasps rose from the colonists. Milan felt every eye on him. His chest grew tight. His first thought was to run, to hide among the others, but something inside stopped him. If he turned away, what would the aliens think of humans? Weak. Cowards. No better than prey. He stepped forward slowly. His legs felt heavy, but he did not stop. The soldiers tried to hold him back, but Milan shook his head. "If I do not go, no one else will," he said. His voice was calm, though his heart pounded. The Alpha watched him with interest. The alien leader stepped back and cleared a space in the field. The other Varrock formed a circle around them. The colonists also gathered at the edge, some praying, others whispering in fear. "This is the test," the Alpha said. "Fight me. Show me if your kind has spirit." Milan stood in the center, facing the towering beast. He had no weapon, no armor. Only his worn boots and the strength of his body. He lifted his fists, though he knew they looked small compared to the Alpha's claws. The duel began. The Alpha moved first, striking with a heavy swing of his arm. Milan barely dodged, falling to the side as the ground shook where the claw landed. The crowd gasped. Milan rolled back to his feet and circled quickly. He had watched wolves on Earth once in an old video. They were hunters, fast and powerful, but they could be outsmarted. The Alpha struck again, faster this time. Milan ducked under the arm and kicked at the leg. The blow did little to hurt the giant, but it made him stumble a step. The Varric warriors watching growled in surprise. Milan's chest burned as he ran in circles, dodging each strike. The Alpha was strong, but his size made him slower. Milan used his smaller frame to slip away at the last second. He grabbed rocks from the ground and threw them, aiming at the eyes and throat. The stones bounced off armor, but one hit the side of the Alpha's face, making him pause. The crowd roared. Humans cheered. The Varric growled louder, their eyes glowing brighter. But the Alpha was not finished. He charged forward, and Milan was too slow to escape. The claws scraped his shoulder, tearing his shirt and leaving a shallow wound. Pain burned through him, but he gritted his teeth. He refused to fall. The Alpha leaned close, showing sharp teeth. "You are fragile, human," he said. Milan spat blood to the side and stared back. "Maybe. But I will not break." With sudden strength, Milan ducked under the Alpha's chest and rammed his elbow into the stomach plate. It was not enough to pierce armor, but it made the giant grunt. Milan then leapt back before the claws could crush him. The duel went on, strike after strike. Milan's body grew weak, his breath heavy, but his eyes never lost fire. The Alpha could crush him at any time, yet he did not. The alien leader tested him, pushing him to his limits, watching how long he could endure. Finally, after what felt like hours, Milan stood trembling, his clothes torn, his face bruised. He raised his fists again. He could barely move, but he refused to step down. The Alpha stared at him, chest rising with deep breaths. The silver fur on his head moved in the wind. Slowly, he lowered his claws. "Enough," the Alpha said. The Varric warriors growled in confusion, but the Alpha raised his hand to silence them. He looked at Milan with respect in his glowing eyes. "You have spirit," he said. "You are chosen." The colonists gasped again, but this time it was not fear. It was shock and hope. The Alpha had not killed Milan. He had honored him. Milan stood tall, though his body ached. He met the Alpha's gaze without fear. In that moment, he knew something had changed. Humanity was no longer only prey in the eyes of these warriors. The challenge was over, but the story had only just begun. The circle of Varric warriors tightened around the field. Their glowing eyes watched with hunger for action. The humans stood just beyond the ring, silent but restless. Some whispered that Milan was crazy to stand against such a beast. Others prayed that somehow he would survive. Milan wiped blood from his lip and lifted his fists again. His body hurt in every bone, but his spirit still burned. He remembered the Alpha's words, "Show me if your kind has spirit." This was no ordinary fight. This was a test, not only for him but for all of humanity. If he fell too quickly, the Varric might believe humans were weak and not worth respect. If he stood long enough, perhaps their view of humans could change forever. The alpha silver fur gleamed under the twin moons. His armor was dented slightly where Milan had struck, but it was clear that the blows had not hurt him deeply. Still, the alpha's eyes showed a spark of respect. He growled low, then spoke through his translator. "Small human, you are bold. But boldness without strength is dust." Milan's chest rose with heavy breaths. He answered in a steady voice, though inside he shook. "Strength is not only in muscle. Strength is in will." The Varric warriors growled at the human's courage. The alpha gave a sharp grin, baring long teeth. He dropped into a stance that looked both animal and soldier-like. His claws flexed in the moonlight. Then the alpha rushed forward. The ground shook as his feet slammed against the soil. Milan barely had time to react. He leapt to the side, feeling the wind of claws brush past him. He rolled, then sprang up and darted around the circle. The alpha turned, eyes locked on him. Milan knew he could not outrun this monster forever. He had to be smart. His eyes searched the ground. Stones, broken tools, bits of soil. Nothing sharp enough to pierce armor. But he could use speed, distraction, and pressure. The alpha lunged again. Milan ducked low and grabbed a rock. He swung it upward and struck the side of the alien's jaw. The rock broke in his hand, but the alpha staggered half a step. The Varric warriors gasped. The alpha touched his jaw with one claw, then laughed. His laugh was deep, like thunder rolling across the hills. "Good. You are not afraid to bite." He attacked again, faster this time. Milan ran, zigzagging to avoid being crushed. The alpha swiped, missing him by inches. Milan slid on the dirt, kicking dust into the alien's face. For a second, the alpha blinked, and Milan struck his ribs with a hard punch. It felt like hitting stone, but the crowd roared. The humans cheered wildly, desperate for any sign of hope. But the alpha was done playing. With sudden speed, he swung his arm wide and struck Milan's chest. The blow sent him rolling across the ground. Pain screamed through his body. He coughed and tasted iron in his mouth. His vision blurred, but he forced himself to rise. The humans cried out for him to stop, to surrender. Even some Varric warriors thought it was over. But Milan pushed himself back onto his feet. His legs shook, his breath rattled, yet he raised his fists again. The alpha tilted his head, studying him. There was no mockery now. Only interest. "Why do you stand again? You know you cannot win." Milan's voice was hoarse, but his words were clear. "Because if I fall now, then my people fall with me. And I will not let that happen." The Varric pack grew silent. Their glowing eyes widened. The alpha lowered his stance again. His claws gleamed. "Then prove it." The duel raged on. Milan dodged left and right, each movement slower than before. Sweat and blood covered his body. His muscles screamed in pain, but his heart pushed him forward. He aimed for weak points: the eyes, the throat, the joints of the armor. Every strike was small, yet every strike carried determination. At one moment, the alpha tried to grab him with both hands. Milan ducked under, sliding between the alien's legs, then leapt onto his back for a second. He wrapped his arms around the alpha's neck, squeezing with all his might. The Varric leader shook violently, tossing him off like a twig. Milan hit the ground hard, but he rose again. The crowd roared louder. Humans shouted his name. Varric warriors howled in excitement. They were no longer watching a weak human fight for survival. They were watching a warrior prove himself with spirit. The Alpha slowed his attacks. His eyes narrowed, as if thinking deeply. He swung again, but with less force, testing Milan rather than crushing him. Milan blocked weakly, stumbling but still on his feet. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Milan's vision swam. His knees nearly gave out. Still, he refused to stop. He had nothing left but his will, and that will burned brighter than the moons above. At last, the Alpha lifted his hand high, ready to deliver the final strike. The humans cried out in despair. Milan raised his fists one last time, even though he could barely stand. He looked straight into the Alpha's glowing eyes. "I will not bow," he said. The Alpha froze. His claws hovered in the air. The silence was deep, broken only by the sound of Milan's ragged breath. Then, slowly, the Alpha lowered his hand. He stepped back, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths of his own. His eyes glowed not with anger but with respect. "Enough," he said. The Varric warriors growled in protest, but the Alpha raised his claw, silencing them at once. He turned to face his pack. "This human is no prey. He is warrior. He has spirit greater than muscle. He has fire greater than claws. He is chosen." The pack roared in surprise. Some argued, but none dared to defy the Alpha. The humans erupted in cheers, voices breaking with relief and pride. Milan stood swaying, hardly believing he was still alive. His chest hurt, his arms shook, but he met the Alpha's gaze firmly. In that silent exchange, he understood. The fight was never about victory. It was about proving that humans could not be broken, no matter the odds. The Alpha stepped closer, towering above him. He placed one clawed hand on Milan's shoulder, careful not to wound him further. "You fought with nothing but will," the Alpha said. "That is strength, the Varric honor." The duel ended not with defeat but with recognition. The Alpha had chosen him, and through him, he had chosen humanity. As the crowd of humans and Varric howled and shouted, Milan stood tall in the moonlight, bloodied but unbowed. The duel had ended, but a new bond was about to begin. The duel had ended, but the night was still alive with tension. The field where the fight had taken place was scarred with claw marks and torn earth. Humans gathered in silence, still stunned by what had happened. The Varric warriors stood in a circle, their glowing eyes fixed on their Alpha. Every face carried questions, but none dared to speak against his decision. Milan stood in the middle of the circle, bruised and bloody. His legs shook, yet he did not collapse. He felt the Alpha's heavy hand on his shoulder, a gesture that was both strange and powerful. The alien leader had declared him chosen, and now the meaning of those words hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. The Alpha's deep voice rumbled again, carried through the translator. "This human has fire. He does not bow to fear. He does not bend before claws. He has earned respect." A Varric warrior stepped forward, his dark fur bristling. His voice was sharp. "Alpha, he is small. His flesh is weak. How can such a creature be chosen?" The Alpha turned slowly, his yellow eyes burning with authority. "Because strength is not only in the body. It is in the will to stand when all hope is gone. He has that will." The warrior lowered his head and backed away. The others growled but did not challenge further. The Alpha's word was law. The humans whispered among themselves. Some were relieved, some confused. The colony leader, a man named Harlan, stepped forward nervously. His face was pale, but he forced himself to speak. What does it mean, chosen? What do you want with him? The Alpha looked at Harlan, then back at Milan. Chosen means he is recognized. He is bond brother to me. His spirit stands with mine. Where I go, he may go. Where he speaks, I will hear. Through him, your people are not prey but partners. The words struck the humans like a storm. A farmer, not a soldier, had just been lifted to the side of a galactic warlord. Some colonists cheered, some stared in disbelief, and some feared what it could mean. Milan himself felt dizzy. Bond brother. Partner. He was no leader. He was no warrior. He was just Milan, who tilled soil and carried water. Yet when he looked at the Alpha's eyes, he knew this was not a mistake. He had been tested, and he had endured. The Alpha released his shoulder and raised his claw to the sky. The Varric warriors howled, a deep cry that echoed across the red fields. It was not a cry of anger. It was a cry of recognition, a signal that a new chapter had begun. That night, the Varric remained near the colony. They set up their camp outside the walls, building fires that glowed blue and cooking strange meats that filled the air with sharp scents. The humans stayed within their gates, still wary, but they could not stop watching the alien warriors. Milan sat on a stone near the colony gate, wrapped in bandages. His shoulder throbbed, his chest ached, but he could not rest. The duel kept replaying in his mind. The claws, the blows, the pain, and the final moment when the Alpha spared him. He did not know what his life would be now. Footsteps heavy as drums approached. The Alpha came, his silver fur shining in the firelight. He stood tall, but his steps were slow and measured. He stopped before Milan and studied him for a long moment. "You are wounded," the Alpha said. "I will heal," Milan answered. His voice was calm, though his body felt like breaking. The Alpha gave a short nod. "Good. Pain is teacher. Pain reminds us that we are alive." Milan lifted his eyes to meet his. "Why me? There are stronger men here. There are soldiers with weapons. Why did you choose me?" The Alpha tilted his head. His sharp teeth glinted as he spoke. "Because you stood when others would not. Your strength is not in muscle, but in courage. You faced me with bare hands. That is why." Milan thought of the moment when every soldier had stayed silent. He had stepped forward because he could not bear the thought of humanity being seen as weak. Perhaps that had been enough. The Alpha crouched low, so that their eyes were level. His voice lowered, almost like a growl. "Among my people, to be chosen means to share trust. I call you bond brother. Do you accept?" Milan's heart pounded. He looked at the great alien, the silver fur, the glowing eyes, the strength that could crush him in a moment. Yet he also saw honor, respect, and truth in those eyes. Slowly, he nodded. "I accept." The Alpha struck his chest with one clawed hand, then extended it toward Milan. Milan placed his hand against it, small against the massive paw. The Varric warriors who watched gave a howl of approval. From that moment, everything changed. The next day, the Alpha walked with Milan through the colony. The humans stared in awe as the towering warrior moved beside the farmer. The Alpha asked questions about their farms, their machines, their shelters. Milan explained as best he could, though his words felt clumsy beside the grandeur of the Varric leader. To Milan's surprise, the Alpha listened closely. He asked about soil, about water, about how humans grew food. "We hunt," he said. "But to grow life from ground, that is strength of another kind. The colonists began to see that the Alpha's choice had brought a bridge between them. Where once there had been fear, now there was conversation. Children whispered that Milan had tamed a monster. Elders whispered that perhaps destiny had placed him in the field that day. Yet not all were pleased. Some humans feared that Milan was too close to the aliens. Some Varric warriors whispered that the Alpha had lowered himself by honoring prey. Tension remained, though respect held it at bay. That evening, the Alpha gathered both humans and Varric before the fire. He stood tall, his voice echoing through the translator. "We came to test. We came to see if your kind had spirit. Now we have seen." This one human stood and did not bow. "Through him, we see that your people may walk beside us." The humans murmured, unsure of what this meant for their future. The Alpha turned to Milan. "You are the first. You will walk with me. You will see our ways. And you will decide if your people are ready to stand beside the Varric." Milan's breath caught in his throat. He had not asked for this role, yet it was his now. He nodded slowly, his heart steady. "I will go." The Alpha gave a sharp grin and struck his chest again. The Varric howled in approval. The humans clapped and cheered, though some still looked uneasy. The choice had been made. Milan was no longer just a farmer. He was bond brother to an alien Alpha, chosen to stand between two worlds. That night, as the fires burned and the moons rose high, Milan lay awake staring at the sky. He wondered what trials awaited him. He wondered if he was strong enough to carry this burden. Yet deep inside, he knew one truth. He had been chosen not by accident, but by the spirit he had shown. And whatever came next, he would face it with the same will that had carried him through the duel. The Alpha had chosen him, and now the path of both human and Varric had forever changed. The days after the duel were strange for the colony. The humans had lived with fear for many years, always watching the sky for ships of raiders or hostile species. Now a powerful warrior race, the Varric, had landed among them. Yet instead of conquest, they had chosen respect, and the bridge between them had a name. That name was Milan. The Alpha stayed close to him. Wherever Milan went, the towering figure followed, his silver fur shining in the sun, his claws glinting under the two moons at night. The colonists whispered every time they saw the two together. Some whispered with hope, others with unease. At first, Milan struggled with the weight of his new role. He was not trained to speak for his people. He was not a leader or a soldier. He was a farmer who had been chosen by chance. Yet when he saw the trust in the Alpha's eyes, he knew he had to learn. The Alpha began to teach him about the Varric. They sat together near the fire at night, surrounded by the pack. The Alpha spoke of their history, their battles, and their code of honor. "We are hunters," the Alpha said. "We take what we need, but we do not waste. We fight with claws, but we also fight with oath. Our word is bond, stronger than steel." Milan listened carefully. He saw that the Varric were not simple beasts, as some humans had feared. They had laws, traditions, and pride in their ways. He also saw their pain. The Alpha spoke of wars they had lost, of worlds where their people had fallen, of enemies who had driven them from star to star. They were strong, but they carried scars. In return, Milan showed the Varric the ways of humans. He brought them to the fields, where crops grew under strange suns. He showed them how humans worked the soil, planned harvests, and built shelters from wood and stone. At first, the Varric laughed. "Why work the ground when you can hunt?" they asked. But when Milan explained that farming meant stability, food for all, and a future that did not depend on endless killing, the Alpha grew thoughtful. This is also strength, the Alpha said. To make life grow from dirt. To feed many from the work of few. It is a kind of hunt, but slower and deeper. The Varrock began to help with the fields. Their claws were sharp enough to dig soil, their strength enough to carry heavy loads. The humans watched with wide eyes as giant wolf-like warriors worked side by side with farmers. For the first time, laughter rose instead of fear. Children ran among them, no longer hiding. The bond between Milan and the Alpha grew strongest of all. They trained together each morning. The Alpha taught him how to move like a predator, how to listen to sound, how to strike at the right moment. Milan was no match in strength, but he learned speed, timing, and courage. In turn, Milan showed the Alpha how humans built tools to extend their reach. He gave the Alpha a simple spade and taught him to plant seeds. The Alpha held the tool awkwardly, but when he saw sprouts rise days later, he gave a deep laugh of joy. "You grow warriors from earth," he said. "Small, but endless." At night, they shared stories. Milan spoke of earth, of oceans and forests, of the old cities that once shone with light. He spoke of human struggles, of wars and unity, of how small people could change the fate of many. The Alpha listened with respect. He told Milan that humans reminded him of the Varrock in their early days, before pride had led them into endless war. The colonists began to change as well. At first, many distrusted the Varrock. They locked their doors, whispered in fear, and stayed away from the camps. But slowly, as they saw the warriors help in the fields, as they heard the howls of celebration instead of battle, their fear lessened. Some even joined the Varrock fires at night, listening to stories of star hunts and alien skies. Yet not all hearts were calm. Some humans feared that the Varrock would one day turn against them. Some Varrock whispered that their Alpha had grown soft by walking with prey. Milan felt this tension every day, but he also saw hope growing stronger than fear. One evening, as the red sun set, Milan sat with the Alpha on a hill outside the colony. They looked down at the fields glowing in twilight, where humans and Varrock worked side by side. "This is strange," Milan said. "A month ago, we thought you came to kill us. Now you help us harvest." The Alpha gave a deep rumble that sounded almost like laughter. "War is easy. Building is hard. You show us a new path, bond brother." Milan turned to him. "And you show us courage we did not know we had. When you pointed at me, I thought I would die. But now, I think it was fate." The Alpha's glowing eyes met his. "It was choice. I saw fire in you, and I chose. I do not regret." Their bond was more than respect now. It was trust, as strong as steel. Milan felt that he could stand before any danger with the Alpha at his side. The Alpha, in turn, trusted Milan to speak truth, even when others doubted. But peace never lasts forever. One night, the Varrock scouts returned with grim news. They had seen ships in the far sky, ships that did not belong to the Varrock or the humans. The Alpha called the pack together. "Another race comes," he said. "They are not friends. They are hunters of worlds. They will test you harder than I did." The colonists trembled. They had no great fleet, no vast army. Their weapons were few, their walls thin. Alone, they could not stand. The Alpha turned to Milan. "Bond brother, the time has come. Our two peoples must fight as one. Will your kind stand with us?" Milan looked at the colony, at the families, at the children who laughed for the first time without fear. He looked at the Varric warriors, fierce yet now trusted allies. His heart was steady. "Yes," he said. "We will stand together." The Alpha struck his chest with his claw and howled to the night sky. The Varric joined him, their howls echoing across the hills. The humans, at first silent, slowly began to cheer. Voices rose, not in fear but in unity. The bond between Milan and the Alpha had grown into something greater. It was no longer just between two beings. It was between two worlds. And that bond would soon be tested in fire. The night was heavy with silence. Only the sound of wind passed through the valley, carrying the smell of crops and firewood. Above, the sky glowed with countless stars, but among them now moved dark shadows. Ships were coming. The scouts had not been wrong. Another race was arriving, a race that hunted without honor, a race that saw weaker worlds as prey. Milan stood with the Alpha on the hill overlooking the colony. The Varric pack gathered behind them, their silver fur shining faintly in the moonlight. The colonists were not warriors, yet they carried old rifles, tools shaped into weapons, and fire in their eyes. They knew they had no choice but to fight. If they ran, there would be nowhere to hide. If they begged, there would be no mercy. The Alpha lifted his head and spoke in a deep voice that carried across the gathering. "They come for conquest. They think you are weak. But together we will show them that humans and Varric are not prey. Together we are a force of the stars." The Varric howled in answer. The humans raised their voices too, clapping weapons against shields, stomping feet against the earth. For the first time, both races shouted as one. Milan felt fear in his chest, but also pride. He turned to the colonists. "We survived storms. We built homes on soil that tried to fight us. We stood against hunger and sickness. Now we stand against this enemy. They think we will break. But tonight, we show them that humanity does not fall." The people cheered, and their voices mixed with the howls of the Varric. The sound shook the valley and rose toward the sky where the enemy ships descended. The first fire lit the night. Red beams shot from the sky, striking the edge of the valley. Trees burst into flame. The ground shook. Women and children were rushed into caves and bunkers while fighters took their places at the walls. The Alpha signaled, and the Varric spread wide, moving like shadows across the hills, ready to strike from hidden paths. Milan gripped his weapon. He was no soldier, but his hands were steady. He had trained with the Alpha. He had learned to move with courage, not just fear. Now was the moment to prove it. The enemy ships landed with thunder. Their doors opened, and armored figures marched out. They were tall, clad in black plating that shimmered in the firelight. Their eyes glowed like embers. They carried weapons built to destroy, but they moved with arrogance, not caution. The Alpha growled. "They see us as nothing. That will be their mistake." The first wave of enemies advanced. Milan shouted to the colonists, "Hold steady. Wait for the signal." The humans crouched behind the makeshift barriers. The Varric waited in the dark hills. The enemy came closer, their heavy steps echoing across the fields. Then the Alpha raised his claw and howled. It was a sound that shook the ground. From the hills, the Varric leapt, silver streaks crashing into the enemy lines. Claws struck metal, jaws clamped down on armored foes, and the quiet valley exploded into battle. Milan raised his rifle and fired. His shot struck true, hitting an enemy in the chest and knocking it back. The colonists opened fire with him. Bullets and beams filled the night. Sparks and screams rang out as humans fought side by side with wolf-like warriors. The enemy staggered under the sudden fury. They had expected an easy victory, but they met resistance they had never imagined. The Varrock tore into their ranks, moving faster than machines could track. The humans fought with grit, refusing to yield even an inch of ground. Milan moved among his people, shouting courage, helping the wounded, firing when he had the chance. At one point, an enemy soldier broke through the barrier and rushed toward a group of children who had not made it to safety. Milan ran forward without thought, raising his weapon. Before the soldier could strike, the Alpha crashed into it, ripping the enemy down with a single blow. The Alpha looked at Milan and nodded. Together. The battle raged for hours. The enemy sent wave after wave, their ships unleashing fire from above. Fields burned, smoke filled the air, but still the defenders stood. Every time a human fell, another rose. Every time a Varrock was wounded, the others howled louder, fighting harder. Milan's body ached, his arms heavy, but his spirit did not break. He saw the colonists who had once feared the Varrock now fighting shoulder to shoulder with them. He saw children carrying water to the wounded, elders throwing stones when they had no other weapon. He saw a people who refused to give up. At last, the enemy brought forth their champion. From the largest ship stepped a towering figure clad in dark armor edged with red. Its weapon was a great blade of burning energy, and its voice thundered across the battlefield. Who leads this resistance? Step forward and face me. The Alpha growled and stepped ahead, his fur bristling. But Milan also stepped forward. The enemy laughed at the sight of a simple human standing beside the wolf warrior. You dare stand with beasts? You think you are equal to us? Milan raised his weapon. No. We are greater. Because we fight not for conquest, but for each other. The duel began. The enemy champion swung his burning blade, striking with deadly force. The Alpha dodged and countered, his claws flashing. Sparks flew as steel met claw. Milan fired from the side, forcing the champion to guard both fronts. The fight was fierce, the enemy strong, but they were not fighting one foe. They were fighting two, bound by trust. The champion struck the Alpha across the shoulder, drawing blood. Milan shouted and ran forward, slamming his weapon into the champion's side. The Alpha seized the moment, leaping with all his strength. Together they struck, and the enemy fell with a roar, its blade shattering in the dirt. The enemy soldiers froze. Their leader was down. The Varrock howled in victory. The humans raised their weapons and charged with renewed fire. The enemy broke, their lines collapsing, their ships lifting in panic. One by one, the dark vessels fled into the sky, leaving behind smoke, silence, and the victorious cries of two united races. The dawn came slowly. The valley was scarred, but it still stood. Fires burned, but the colony had not fallen. Wounded were tended, fallen were honored, but the people were alive. Milan stood beside the Alpha, both weary yet proud. The colonists gathered around them. For the first time, there was no fear in their eyes when they looked at the Varrock. There was only respect. The Alpha placed a clawed hand on Milan's shoulder. You stood as warrior, as brother, as bond stronger than blood. From this day, Varrock and human are one pack. Milan nodded. From this day, we stand together. No one will break us. The crowd cheered. Varrock and human voices mixed in a sound that shook the morning sky. It was no longer the song of two peoples. It was the song of one. From that day on, the colony was not just human. It was Varric too. Fields were planted with claws and hands. Songs were sung in two tongues around the same fire. Children of humans played with pups of Varric, no longer afraid. And when ships of strangers passed near their world, they saw the fire of unity and turned away. For they knew this was not a weak world. This was a world where humans and Varric stood side by side, a world that could not be broken. Milan looked at the horizon, the Alpha beside him. He thought of the future, of the challenges to come. But he no longer felt fear. He felt strength. Humanity had found allies not by conquest but by courage. And together, they had written a story that the stars would never forget.